Hello everyone, welcome again to another training session on the Open Security Summit training track. We are joined by Imran and Practical DevSecOps today again. We've done the first session yesterday, it was great. And today we're going to do the session on dynamic testing and how you can integrate that into your pipeline. So a little bit about the Open Security Summit. Open Security Summit normally happens on site in London, but COVID has enabled us to reach out to a virtual and global audience, which has been great. And it also enabled us to have training sessions before the actual summit sessions begin. So the summit is next week, and this week is the second week of the training sessions. It has been going really good and intense. I have learned a lot myself. That's part of why I volunteered to organize this thing, so that I can learn more. And this is a very open, collaborative environment. We all try to learn from each other because we're all from different walks of life and different industries. And the way to progress the security industry is to share our knowledge between each other. Otherwise, we're going to make the same mistakes over and over again. So participation is key. Please do unmute yourselves when you have a question, ask them. But if you prefer, there's the chat window as well in Zoom. I will be monitoring the chat and voicing your questions to Imran. Yep, these are our values. Yeah, mutual respect. Obviously, we do respect you, and we do expect you to respect our speakers and all the other people that are attending the session. And we did not have any incidents, and I don't suppose we will have any incidents, but just to mention it. And do challenge the speaker. Nobody knows perfect. Although Imran is closer to perfect, he's just a human as well, and we are all here to collaborate. So another thing is the openness. As the name implies, it's Open Security Summit. We are open. We don't have secrecy. We share the material. We share the recording. This session is being recorded and will be shared as well. And do check our website like a week later for the video and any supporting materials we will be posting there. We did touch up on respect. Yeah, and in light of the recent events, yes, please be respectful for each other. We need each other. And OSS 2020 is our hashtag this year. Please share it generously on social media. Tell us and tell the world how you're finding the sessions. Do you find them good, bad? Share your experience. And we have a Slack community. I will post the invite in the chat window in a minute. If you're not part of it, please do join us. And because the conversation continues in the Slack. We don't always have sessions, but the Slack channel is active throughout the year. So we can continue asking questions to each other and learn from each other. So that is me. I will hand over to Imran now. I will stop my sharing. Yes, Imran, you can take over.
Thank you, Dida. And I definitely don't say I know everything. I'm also learning. I'm also a learner. As you can see, I'm gonna just put a face to the name and then let me know if you're able to see me.
Yes.
Yeah. And you're able to hear me as well.
Oh, and I forgot to say, Imran and Practical DevSecOps, they're our training sponsors this year. They're providing the lab you will be using in the session.
Okay, can you guys confirm that you're able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so we are from Practical DevSecOps. As Dida mentioned, we are training sponsor for Open Security Summit. Thanks to both Dida and Dennis and rest of the team to make it happen. Even though we are sponsoring this event, we would like to keep it pretty interactive and also pretty knowledge-based. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Right. So let me introduce who I am. I'm Imran. She already introduced me, but yeah, so we run the largest DevSecOps certification program. We have certified a lot of people with the help of our platform and other things, and it's not to be taken lightly, because in order to get the certification, you have to pass a 12-hour exam wherein you will implement end-to-end DevSecOps pipeline as part of the exam. It's not MCQ, so it's pretty valuable in the industry at the moment because of that. So I've spoken in a bunch of conferences. I've trained in conferences like AppSecU, AppSec, other different AppSec conferences. I'm training again in AppSec as part of July. So even we regularly train at Black Hat and stuff like that. So we do know a little bit about DevSecOps, so that's why we are here. And we also do a couple of open source projects like DevSecOps Studio, DevSecOps University, DevSecOps Newsletter, and also DevSecOps Online Meetup. And just to help community grow and then spread the knowledge about DevSecOps. And we organized about close to 100 monthly meetups and workshops on DevSecOps or application security in general. If you would like to get in touch with me after the talk as well, you can reach out to me at SecVigo. We can definitely have some interesting conversations. And I will try to keep it pretty simple, but let's do a quick round of, not introduction, but can you guys please let me know if you were here yesterday? So you were there in our static analysis talk. If you were there, can you please open up your chat? There is a chat button. It should be under more and chat, and then say, yeah or yes.
Or you can use the yes button under the participant box.
I think that didn't work out yesterday, so I'm just gonna say chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have 4 yeses, 5, 6, 7 yeses, and 3 no's.
Okay, so it looks like most of you are there. So what we will do is, I'll still wait for a couple of more answers, because I really need to know how much I have to cover from a DevSecOps perspective before we get into the meat of the session, which is dynamic analysis today.
Yeah, we have a few now, so if you want to
cover, fair enough.
Again.
Yeah, I will cover it briefly, but to the folks who were there yesterday, let's make it interactive, and you might want to ask me questions which I did not cover or you think were relevant, which would be interesting to cover. Feel free to stop me while I'm speaking, and then we'll make it interactive. Okay, fair enough. So first, in order to, so we are in DevSecOps track, right? So I ran the 2018 Open Security Summit track along with Francois and a bunch of other my friends. So I think DAST or SAST or anything of that sort is very relevant and very probably very needed automation which has to be done as part of DevSecOps. That's very, very important. We are on the same page what DevSecOps means for you. Of course, there's no agreed upon definition on what DevSecOps is. Everyone has their own definition of it, but then we will try to be on the same page, at least for the sake of this session. You don't have to agree with me, beyond the session, but that's pretty much about it. So as part of the DevSecOps, in order to implement DevSecOps, you at least needs to have DevOps pipelines or CI pipelines. So the point being, if you don't have automation in place or the process in place on how to embed security, then where would you embed it, right? So CI/CD is very important for any DevOps or DevSecOps platform or pipeline for that matter. And since we are doing DevOps, Agile, DevSecOps, you have to store your code somewhere. So we are now trying to do everything as code, which includes threat modeling as code, hardening as code, compliance as code, policy as code, you name it, star as code. Everything we want to do as code, including infrastructure as code. Now you might be surprised, we also do something called false positive as code. What do I mean by that? So I made up that term, of course, like yeah, why should Gartner have all the fun? I can also create some tool, but so what I mean by that is that a developer doesn't have to go into a machine or some portal and then mark an issue as false positive. You should be able to do it just locally in the code, such that you reduce the context switch for a developer from coding to going to a web app and clicking a bunch of links, a bunch of forms, buttons, and whatnot. So we want to reduce as much as possible the context switch. Once we have the code, we want to build it. There are a bunch of tools on how to build it. Once it's ready, we want to make sure that we store it someplace. It could be JFrog, it could be Docker registry, or what have you, Nessus and whatnot. Again, I'm not endorsing or recommending these things, but these are typical tools you might find. Okay, then you have Jenkins, Travis CI, Circle CI, Bitbucket CI, whatnot. And for provisioning and configuration, you can use Terraform if you're using AWS, GCP, Azure. But if you're on an on-prem solution, maybe you might want to use SSH, Rundeck, Ansible, Console as such. Right? Similarly, if you're using like an on-prem cloud infrastructure, maybe you want to use OpenStack, or maybe Kubernetes. If you're using cloud, you might want to use AWS, GCP, and Azure. So no matter what your tooling is, you will be able to implement DevSecOps. Now, the first thing when I try to talk about DevSecOps, people talk about, oh, what kind of tools to use? But the point is, as I mentioned yesterday as well, tools are not important. Why am I saying that? Because let's take an example. You have JFrog Artifactory, which is basically storing your artifact. The artifact which can go to production or staging environment, you're storing it. You can also very well use Docker registry as an artifact. Of course, there are limitations on what JFrog can do and registry can do. But the eventual point or the fundamental of it is you are storing some kind of deployable artifact somewhere. That's it. And when it comes to Git, you might be using GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket, or any service. But eventually, even though they have pretty UIs and a bunch of CI/CD systems around it, all of them provide you a way to store the code. If we understand that fundamentals, then it does not matter if you're using GitLab, because if you know Git, you can push to GitLab, you can push to Bitbucket, you can push to GitHub, right? So it should be pretty fairly obvious. So that's what I meant by tools don't matter. So in order to go through the scenario, when we teach it, it's very important that we take a scenario and try to solve it, kind of thing. So we are taking a scenario here called, there's a company called Teachera. It's an imaginary company created by us. We own the domain for that. And then, so the CEO is he's doing pretty well because they got Series C funded just now. So they're pretty, and because of the glamour around startup and because of the visibility they got because of the Series C funding, they started to see lots and lots of attacks on their web app. And eventually they got compromised, and not just once, but twice, because there was no one who was handling security at the moment. So they are a size of a company of about 50 people. So they hired Brad to help them do information security. And then Brad, once he came in, he figured it out, I cannot do it alone, so I need help. So he hired Nick and Lisa, both of them, to do security. And for the sake of argument, we are going to divide it into InfoSec and then AppSec. I would probably prefer not to divide that such way, but then let's talk about it. Okay, InfoSec engineer, he's going to take care about your hardening, monitoring, that kind of thing, probably towards the right-hand side of shift left pipeline, or the CI/CD pipeline. Whereas Lisa is hired to help people find application security issues early on, which is kind of relevant to what we are talking today, and build security inside out rather than thinking it or patching it at the end. That's what we're trying to achieve here. Again, you can use any tool of your choice. Tools do not matter. You can, tools come and go, but the technology fundamentals stay the same. Now, let's take a step back and think about it. When people talk about security, they usually think about this, right? People, processes, and technology. And unfortunately or fortunately, when people implement DevSecOps, they tend to concentrate more on automation. But sad reality is that if you concentrate only on tooling, this is what would happen. DevOps teams or agile teams, your developers teams, will start complaining about you as a security team because your tools are slow. You don't know how to integrate them. You don't know how to make them work, how to give the value to your developers. Basically, 4 questions. Are we providing values for developers or operations when they need it, where they need it, and how they need it? So these 3 questions are very, very important while you're implementing any tooling as such. Now, I've seen a bunch of banks doing this, bunch of companies doing it, and they just throw money at the problem and they think that it's going to solve. For example, I know a bank here in Asia, they spent $2 million on implementing DevSecOps. So they bought very fancy tooling and pretty expensive tooling because, you know, expensive means awesome, right? So they bought very expensive tooling, and then they embedded it. And exactly after a year, they had to scratch that entire program because they did not get any buy-in from DevOps team. They didn't get any value out of it, and they couldn't scale it. And that could also happen with you and me if you don't concentrate on the fundamentals, which is people and processes. So again, the order matters. People first, and then processes, and then technology. And it's definitely not lip service, so to say, but yes, you have to follow that process. So we first talk about what do we need to do from a people perspective or processes perspective before you embed security in CI/CD pipeline. Okay, we all know this traditional waterfall SDLC model. What are the problems with this? I can use the chat function now. What do you think are the problems with typical waterfall CI/CD model?
Pen testing at the end.
Okay, it takes time. Someone is saying it takes time. I'm definitely not going to call your name, so feel free to, share your. It takes time, yeah. Dida mentioned pen testing, which is basically you give an impression to this organization that if you do pen test at the end, you are pretty secure by default, right? Yeah, go ahead, guys. Please do. You can only step backwards in waterfall model. Okay, yeah. Basically, what he meant was that you cannot iterate or be agile, so to say. Okay. Few releases is another thing, and then when we find issues, someone say that we find issues way too late. You know, by the time you find issues, it's already too late. The reason for that is, for example, let's say you are going live, meaning you're going live on production, GA, whatever you call it, next week. And then as part of the checklist to go live, you have to do pen test, right? Usually because of compliance, like PCI DSS or whatnot, or best practice enforced by your security team. When they do that, they have a checkbox, hey, get pen test done. So they come to pen testing team and say, we are going live next week. Could you please help us do pen test? Now, do you think reasonably, let's say your team found like 2 or 3 issues, and then say you said, okay, this is a high severity issue. This is a SQL injection. If you go live now, we would be putting ourselves on a big risk, right? A large amount of risk. So probably we should not go. And then typical answer would be from DevOps team, we promised our customers and we want to keep our goodwill in the market. So we'll definitely, we are going to go live. Probably we'll do something about security. Eventually, what I've seen with our consulting, with my consulting experience and other experiences I had, that people just take exception saying that, oh, we will deal with it probably next week. And fortunately, unfortunately, sometimes that next week never comes, right? Does that happen? Did it happen to you guys before? I'm sure some of you can relate to that experience, right? Yeah, so that's some of the problems we have there. And then it's pretty expensive to fix issues in production than fixing it in development, in staging, or in testing phase, to be very honest, right? So because of this, and if you have to think about it, it's again comes back to it's costly because of people. It's very difficult to maintain the process, and the technology will, again, it's expensive to fix things. So again, people, process, technology. And I like to, now, because of these things, people started talking about how can we solve this problem of iterating fastly, making sure what business wanted is what development teams have delivered. They started talking about, and I like to call this as wall of uncertainty. And the way the business and development team, and please note down here, the requirements, this is done by your business people usually, are the product people. Design is probably by architects. This is development, this is staging and testing and whatnot, production, and then finally you maintain it, right, GA. So you will see that we'll slowly move towards your left-hand side to right, okay, in terms of exploring why security is a bottleneck. And then you will quickly realize that there was a disconnect between what business wanted versus what development team provided ultimately to the customer. And you might have come across this image on internet where you'll say a customer asked for a car, we eventually gave him a bicycle, a circus bicycle, a one-tire bicycle. That's what happens because the requirements are freezed and they don't change often, like once in 6 months, and so you change it. So that's pretty too late by the time it comes. So they solved it with the help of something called Agile. Okay, there's again a lot of things. I'm generalizing it, not good for the sake of our discussion. It's pretty interesting. So they solved it using Agile. Now there was a disconnect between business and developers. We fixed that. Now we are moving towards our right-hand side. Next, what we do is now developers, because of Agile, they are pushing code to production every 9 seconds. Imagine that, every 9 seconds, some organizations are pushing code to production. Now, don't you wonder every 9 seconds, they might also be introducing vulnerabilities? Yeah, possible. We cannot say for sure, but definitely, yeah. So someone is saying that, yeah, if you find an issue, we might be able to fix it in the next century. Right? That's also a problem we have. And then, this is a genuine word. This is not made up term by me. It's called wall of confusion. You can Google it, you'll find out. So operations team were in a similar situation where security team is currently, you and me, where they are. We are now currently at the juncture, right? So they solved it. This operations teams or DevOps team have solved this problem using a methodology called DevOps, right? Where instead of developers developing a code and throwing it across the wall to operations and saying that, okay, it runs on my machine, it should run on production, deal with it, kind of. And there's a lot of things which are missing, it doesn't work and whatnot. So DevOps helps you solve the problem with the help of some amazing things. But right now, that diagram of requirements, design, implementation, and then deploy and maintenance, instead of it having a beginning and end, it became a circular motion now. That's what DevOps brings, right? Instead of fixing your requirements once or 6 months, maybe you do it probably once a week or twice a week, something like that, or maybe once a month. Whatever cadence you decide, but you see that we are continuously going to do this. We're going to create software, we're going to verify it, deploy it, and maintain it. So that's the DevOps definition. Now you see there was a problem between business and development. They solved using Agile. Problem between developers and ops. They solved it with the DevOps. Now we have problem, and I like to call it wall of compliance, right? Because you have to go through security before you go live. Now, unfortunately, people have love and hate relationship between these. Some people look at us like, oh, these guys are so like geeks who don't want to collaborate with others and pretty difficult to work with. That's a kind of a typical archetype we have. But if you do DevSecOps, this is how you will turn up. We will be the new cool kid on the block, right? Now, another problem we have is we implement whatever Microsoft SDLC used to say before. They used to call these gates. If you implement these gates, we have about like 15 gates here. Some of them can be automated, some of them cannot be automated. Then it would definitely not take 10 to 15 minutes. And it's a big problem if you have any scan as part of your CI/CD pipeline, which takes 10 minutes. Now you might ask me, hey, what about the full scans? You can do them in QA stages where they do performance tests and all of that. Okay. Other problem is DevSecOps will help you solve is we are outnumbered, security, compliance, you name it. And I'm being very gracious and generous here. It's not usually 100:1. So for every 100 developers, we are assuming there's one security engineer. I've seen organizations where For every 500 developers, there's a one security engineer. Now, are we making an assumption here saying that I can take care of all the work, all the code generated by 500 developers and secure them consistently? Right? Think about that. It's a huge, huge problem which we have. So that's why we need automation. That's why we need DevSecOps, so to say. Now, this is what I like to think about DevSecOps, which is there is no such thing called DevSecOps. So as you can see, heading starts with DevSecOps, and I stated DevOps. But like always, security was left behind because we were reluctant to work with people. Now, DevSecOps brings in that attention to saying that, okay, organizations have moved in their digital transformation from Agile to DevOps. Now we also have to think about security in this pipeline, right? So DevSecOps as a term is definitely helping us bring that attention to the security, much needed attention to the security, okay? So some of them, there are two schools of thoughts online, which is some people see there is a need for DevSecOps. Some people think there is no need for another term because inherently, by definition, security was part of DevOps. Again, right? You might agree, disagree. It's up to you to decide what you want to do. But if you do this from a security perspective, you will achieve this. So you will be able to fix issues early on. If developers are pushing code to production every 9 seconds, introducing vulnerabilities, which means you can also push fixes, vulnerability fixes every 9 seconds. So that gives you in a pretty good, puts you in a pretty good state, right? Similarly, automation, it will help you reduce your stress. And biggest of all, since most of you are from a security background, you will be able to sleep peacefully, right? No wonder average age of a CISO is just 17 months in a company, right? So every 17 months, a CISO changes organization because there is so much of stress. There's also another survey talking about this specifically, but if you do this, we will be able to sleep peacefully. And this again brings to the point, which is like you have to work on culture, automation, measurement, and sharing, and that order matters, people, processes, and technology. If you don't do any of these, I wouldn't call that shop or an organization a DevSecOps shop. So you have to build that culture and whatnot. So I'm going to skip this thing. And the way you do about it is put everything in CI/CD pipeline, make everything self-service, put everything as security as code, secure by default, and definitely have security champions program, right? Okay, so while doing it, you might use a free tool, a paid tool. You can do it. So even you don't have to have millions to do DevSecOps or benefit from DevSecOps. OWASP has lots and lots of amazing projects. Sam here does some of them, contributes to some of them. A lot of us do it here as well. So definitely check out OWASP here. There's a very interesting tool called Defect Dojo. This is taken from there. You can take that and whatnot. Okay, so in short, you have to automate whatever you can. So my boss used to say, if a monkey can patch, a monkey can run it, automate it. If a monkey can do it, automate it. Meaning that anything which doesn't require a human brain, you should automate it. Specifically static analysis, dynamic analysis. Some aspects of it could be automated. I'm not saying you can automate 100% of it. Otherwise, we will not have jobs. That's the thing. Put everything in CI/CD pipeline. That gives us measurability, visibility, metrics, and whatnot to see are we improving, are we not. And then the tools, use the tools which are used by developers. You see here, if you push your issues, security issues from on anything which is not Jira or a system used by developers, then it's not going to fly. Why? Because your mean time to remediate, meaning the time between you finding an issue and it getting fixed highly depends on the context switch. The less number of context switches you have, you make a developer or a QA team go through, the more your mean time to remediate will increase. Of course, there's a lot of other factors to it, but this is, I think, is a very, very relevant topic to DevSecOps. So don't push into, okay, so if we want to push into a system like SSE or checkmarks or something of that sort, please do so. Threat fix, please do so. But make sure eventually that lands into the workflow of developers. That's what we are trying to achieve here. Okay, I'm going to skip some of these and take questions. So today, as part of the lab, this is kind of a setup I have. So we have a a developer machine, we have software, source code management software, we have CI/CD pipeline, we have a runner and a production machine. Okay, let's look at that. Where is it? Okay, so each of you will get a instance of, and this is again running on a platform created by us by just click of a button. This is all automated. You don't have to do anything here. So I'm going to refresh this platform once again, but let me show you an example. So for example, let's take this as an example. So this is our platform where we teach our students on how to how do you embed static analysis tools or dynamic analysis tools and whatnot, right? So let's start with the exercise. So we'll see, okay, what are we trying to do here? Maybe static analysis or dynamic analysis or something of that sort, right? Now you see here, okay, I'll let it load. So what we have here is that in order to do any analysis or test, first we have to download the code. Once you download the code, you're going to get into that code directory, and then next you're going to install whatever tool you're going to use, and then finally we'll look at what this tool can do versus what this tool cannot do. And once we are done with it, we'll eventually run this tool. This is what we're going to do. You just have to click on this button and it will happily execute for you. Okay. So once you click that link, let me just refresh this. Once you click on this link, we will provision GitLab and a production machine for you. Okay, as you can see, I'm just going to refresh this page. And yeah, so you're going to see this. So let it load. Okay, meanwhile, do we have any questions? I'll see if I will shut off my video, the speed increases a bit.
So we don't have any questions in the chat window, but if you guys have any questions, please feel free to voice them or write in the chat window.
Okay, so as you can see, we were able to, I stopped my video just to save some bandwidth. As you can see, there is a prod, and you see here, this UI, this the URL path changes, the machine name changes for each of you. It's different for each of you. So we will be giving you this once we are done with the theoretical session. Okay, so you can access it and log in into this portal. You have some vulnerable, this is some vulnerable component here we have, right? So this is a production machine you will have access to. Each of you have access to. My colleague Yuga will share those with you. Oh, someone is asking a question. Is DevSecOps a company which provides training or provides security to companies? It's a, for a lack of a better word, I would say it's a methodology or a way of doing security as part of DevOps, a CI/CD pipeline. Okay, so as you can see, I'm logged in. Yeah, I'm logged in, and this is the code we are going to secure today. So there's a project called Django Envy. It's an open source project again. You can just Google
There's
about
another question.
Yeah.
What are the open source tools for DAST? Which companies are using?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, the tooling does not matter. Okay, it might look weird to you because I'm not here to pitch you on my tooling or my services or my training. Okay, the reason being, there is an open source tool for everything. If you are on Python, you have something like Bandit. If you're on Ruby on Rails, you have Brickman. If you're on Java, you have Find Security Bugs or Spot Bugs. DAST is not programming dependent. It depends on you, are you using HTTP protocol or not, WebSockets or not. So again, don't concentrate, as I mentioned a lot, on the tooling itself. Concentrate on the fundamentals, which is, are we able to basically handle this, learn how this thing works together. Okay, all of these things work together. Okay, looks like it's taking too long for it. Okay, it's back up. Now, what we're going to do here is that we're going to embed this as part of GitLab CI/CD pipeline. You might be using Jenkins or Travis CI, Circle CI. Again, does not matter. The tool does not matter as long as you are able to do that. I have one more. Another question is that what's the prerequisites for getting started with DevSecOps? To be very honest, you have to know a bit of basics of what DevOps is doing and a bit of CI/CD and how to push code to a Git repository. Only a couple of commands, git push, git add, git merge, git commit, something like that. It doesn't have to be rocket science. Okay. So today we will see a bunch of open source tools when it comes to static analysis. We will look at Nikto. So let's talk. So the lab infrastructure is like this right now. So you have the browser which you're accessing. There you have a GitLab, then you have a prod. So hold on a minute. Okay, so I'll quickly show you. It's pretty slow actually. So as you can see, I'm able to type a command ls. It will work. As you can see, it did figure it out. Now, what I can do is I can just clone this repository by clicking this just button. That's what you will be doing in a couple of minutes. All you have to do is click this button and it will be copied and ran here without you having to do anything. Okay. And then you can go into this directory and I'm showing you static analysis, but again, we will be doing exactly the same thing for the dynamic analysis. Don't worry about it. And then I'm going to install Bandit. It's going to install our software. So does another question I have is, does GitHub provide CI/CD capabilities? Yes. So they call it GitHub Actions. But again, as I mentioned, no matter what CI/CD systems you're using, it's just a glamorized. So I like to call CI/CD systems as glamorized remote code execution vulnerabilities. And you are using that for good, which is to do good stuff, right? So don't worry about tooling as much as about what are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve? We are trying to find out vulnerabilities before it goes to production. That's what we are trying to achieve here.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Boy, my internet is really, really slow.
And it gets slower because you're sharing the screen. It slows everything down.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
We received another question.
Sure.
How to build PHP project in DevOps. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a typical problem which I find with security people is that they think too much about tooling, as I mentioned again. And I'm not picking on you, okay? Excuse me, sir. I'm not picking on again, because I got like 10 or 20 questions here just about tooling. As I've been repeating, it does not matter, Why? Why it does not matter? So when you go in-house, no one is asking you as a security engineer to create your software stack or CI/CD pipeline. It's already there. As you can see my screen now, I came in an organization, they already have a CI/CD pipeline there, and they're doing a bunch of stuff. They are building whatever project they are building. This is a Python project. This would be same for both a Python, Ruby, Node.js, whatever. I don't care, to be very honest. What I want to know, can I conceptually know, okay, this is what they're doing in build stage, in test stage. It definitely helps you, but then it's not as important as you might think, right? So you just Google, how do you build a PHP? And you have like hundreds and hundreds of ways of building a PHP project. Maybe you're using Composer, you're not using Composer, you are using Laravel, or you're not using Laravel, you're using Docker containers, you're not using Docker containers, you're creating a dev packages or not. It's like a science of its own. Now, if you go in that rabbit hole of trying to know everything, you will end up becoming a DevOps engineer, not a security engineer. I have to warn security people on this one, okay? Don't try to learn everything in DevOps. You only have to know the fundamentals to get in. Of course, it's awesome, but when time permits, you do that, right? Your job is to secure stuff, not to build stuff. Okay, so as you can see, we built it, and then you can look into the help command to see what kind of stuff it provides. Okay, as you can see, the command is running. It will find out a bunch of issues. I'm sorry, it will give you what it's created and what it's not created. And yeah. Okay, so I think I will leave this here. You can click on this button and automatically you will see here that anything which has a checkbox means that you already executed the command. We haven't executed this command yet, so that's why it's that. So again, this has nothing to do with the platform. It's my internet connectivity. If I stop sharing screen, it will come pretty nicely. Okay, so let's go on and look into our DAST topic. Okay. Okay. So let's take a couple of questions here if you have any. Otherwise, we'll get into the DAST analysis, which specifically we are going to cover. Again, question, right? So some of you asked questions about tooling. We were going to cover that. So you have ZAP, which is an OWASP open source software to do dynamic analysis right here. And then you have Burp Suite, it's a paid solution. You have Nikto, SSLIs, Nmap. Again, all of these are free and open source. We stress highly here on open source tools because we want you to go home and start implementing these tools right away instead of waiting to acquire, paid tooling. So yeah, we're going to talk about this in a minute. Any questions? Till then. Okay, so I think we will go on and then talk about DAST. We'll come back to CI/CD, why we need CI/CD, how we can embed all of these dynamic analysis tools as part of CI/CD pipelines. And then we'll see how that will add a lot of value here. Okay. Again, as I mentioned, you might use Travis CI, Bitbucket CI, Jenkins, does not matter. Try to just see how this is working. It's very, very simple, to be very honest. Okay. So please bear with me. Okay, let's go back and yeah, okay. So you can see here, it did give us a help command, and then we are now running a bunch of tests. We clicked on it and then we got, okay, there's a high severity issue in our code we might want to look into. So the vulnerability is in this page. Okay, the Vim is not here. I'll try VI. Okay, VI is here. As you can see, there is issue here. This could lead to kind of a remote command execution vulnerability as part of OWASP injection or OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. So yes, so and this is interactive. This is not like secluded or contained environment. You can do anything which you can do on a regular machine. Okay, so I have another question. Fair enough. So when doing SAS and DAST, am I expected to know the programming language on which the project is built? For DAST, you don't need to know programming language. Yeah. So for DAST, you don't need to know about a programming language. You have to know about a protocol called HTTP or WebSocket if you're using that. For SAS, yes, you have to know it. But one problem I see in this assumption or expectations from people or organizations is when you don't want to hire a person who knows every language, why don't you want to hire a person who knows to read, who knows how to read the code for every language from a security perspective, right? So are we assuming because your organization uses Python, Ruby, Node.js, and all of that, a security engineer is expected to know all of those, right? Very, very difficult thing to achieve. Even if you do, you might be doing it like on a very superficial level. You don't know what goes on. You need to know a bit of basics of that language. But if you know fundamentals, you can take your help of your developers to make your job easy, even though you don't know that language. All right.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Sure, go ahead.
So say we have run these.
Sure.
And of course, there will be false positives. And
yes.
So I am not a coder myself. So I might not be able to identify those false positives. And it will take a lot of time for the developers and engineers to go through them. So what's the best
Correct.
way? Is there a good way of going through them?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, you have to understand fundamentals. What's a typical blueprint of a vulnerability, right? So you start off with someone being malicious and then trying to inject something at a place where you did not expect it to be landing. For example, someone might use a SQL command to try exploiting SQL injection vulnerabilities, right? Now, do you need to know about a programming language to know this? No. You know, okay, there is some input somewhere, it's called source, it's coming, and then it's sitting somewhere or landing somewhere on the production machine or on your web app, right? Now your job is to find out, is it landing at a bad place, right? Now that bad place is pretty generic in some sense. That bad place could be your SQL queries, that bad place could be your API calls and whatnot. So if you know that structure, then you are very good at it. Of course, it really helps if you know the language, but I don't expect my developers to know 10 languages because my company uses 10 languages. That's why companies like Netflix, they suggest that let's only use 5 languages. Now, if you want me to use something like R or weird language, we will not support it. It's not a paved path. The reason they do it, because they want to keep that expertise. And even if the engineer leaves, we will still be able to maintain it. That's the reasoning behind it. Some of you cannot, do not have that luxury, fair enough. But yeah, try to at least know fundamentals of static analysis or dynamic analysis. And then not few, if you know one programming language, then that's probably good enough for you, because you can just take that learning and apply to other programming languages. They are not different from a fundamental security perspective for us, but then yeah. Yeah, so and basics of vulnerable code looks like, yeah, if you can do that, yes, definitely. Now, another question I have is, security engineers are therefore not AppSec engineers? So if I do answer that question, I'm gonna hurt some people. And if I don't answer, maybe I'm gonna hurt you here. So what I will say is, I have this assumption, or I have this thought that down the line, everyone would be just called security engineers, because you might have heard about this term called software is eating the world, right? So even now, like if you want to create a network on AWS, what do? You write a code, you do infrastructure as code, and it's handled for you, right? So you don't need a dedicated network engineer to do a small to medium kind of a setup. But of course, if you're doing something very fancy, you need it. But in general, they have democratized that whole functionality of setting up the infrastructure without needing a network engineer, right? So yes, probably it would happen in future. I don't see it at least 5 to 6 years down the line. But again, I will highly recommend everyone who is here, please pick up some DevOps tool, or try to look at how we can do security as code, hardening as code, compliance as code. That will make you a well-rounded engineer. On top of that, it will increase your chances of success in a job market, especially in this day and age with the pandemic running around. So more skills you bring to the table to the organization, probably there's a more likelihood that you will be seen as value add. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now. Let's go into presentation. So shall we take a 10 minutes break and then resume here back again? So we're going to talk about, as I mentioned here, we're going to talk about Nikto, SSLIs, attack ZAP, of course, and then we'll do together exercises. Okay.
Shall we do a 5-minute break, and then we can come back, and because we might have more questions.
Sure.
But so I have already received access code for myself. Is everyone receiving them one by one?
What do you mean by the portal?
Yes.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm just refreshing it. I'm adding some more exercises to it. So give me a couple of minutes. Once you're back from the break, let's do that. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, then.
Let's see everyone in 5 minutes. I'm pausing the recording as well.
Sure. So now we will cover what is DAST or dynamic analysis. And when we say dynamic analysis, it typically means anytime you're running a test while the application is running. The static analysis is when you are not running the app itself, but looking at the code from a security perspective. Dynamic analysis is looking at the code, a running code, runtime or dynamic security, and looking at its security from that perspective, right? So like how we discussed static analysis yesterday, dynamic analysis also has its own strengths and weaknesses. So when it comes to strengths, you don't have to know a lot of languages in order to get started with dynamic analysis. Also, you can call it as pen testing if you have to, but pen testing is a form of dynamic analysis. But when it comes to weaknesses is also because if you cannot guarantee a good spidering, if you cannot guarantee that you are trying to reach each and every page, then dynamic analysis doesn't work for you. So scrolling or spidering is very, very crucial when it comes to dynamic analysis. And especially if you're using JavaScript heavy frameworks, you have to be really, really careful in terms of how you automate dynamic analysis. And when it comes to threats, you can say that many tools, don't fit into CI/CD pipeline. That's specifically because they take forever to run. And as I mentioned before, yesterday and today as well, it's a great sin to run any tool which takes more than 15 minutes of time in a CI/CD pipeline. It should ideally take 10 minutes. I'm just being optimistic by saying 15 minutes. It should be less than 10. And finally, if you do a good spidering with the help of a QA test, then you have a very good chance of covering a lot of attack surface. Right? So dynamic analysis, you can do it for applications, you can do it for configurations, infrastructure as code, Docker, benchmark security specifically, and a bunch of other ones. So you can do dynamic analysis for a lot of things. Right? When it comes to tooling, you have like Zap, which can add a lot of value in CI/CD pipeline. You also have SSLIs, you have Nmap. So we'll talk about each of those tools in a minute. And as mentioned before, these are some of the systems we are running in the lab. And as always, before you put it into CI/CD pipeline, you have to first run it locally and then put it in CI/CD pipeline, right? Never try to put directly into CI/CD pipeline. You will mess up the infrastructure of DevOps and they'll be really, really pissed off. Now, when you start doing pen tests or any kind of security test, you want to get an idea about what are we looking at, what are we against from a web app perspective. So Nikto comes in pretty handy, though it's pretty old. It really, really is a good tool to get a vibe of, okay, this tool is pretty old, new, is it using deprecated functionality, directories, and whatnot. So it helps you do that. It can help you fingerprint around 1200 servers and then specific versions of 270 servers. So this is a very great tool. You can also add tooling like Joom Scan, VP Scan, and whatnot. If you're using WordPress, you're using Joomla, Nikto, and whatnot. And as you can see here, we can definitely ignore issues. You can, it cannot ignore issues locally. And then it does not fail based on severity. So I want to fail based on high severity, low, medium, and combination of those. And then it does not give me an exit code or it fails a build if we find a security issue. And then finally, it can help you save the results in a file, which is very, very important when you do CI/CD pipelines. Okay, so we're going to do an exercise now called Nikto. So here we will install the Nikto, and then we will see what are the different options it provides us. And then finally, we will be able to see, hold on a minute.
I'm guessing Nikto is another open source tool, is it?
Yeah, that's that. Okay, let me just do this. Okay. Just give a minute.
And in the meantime, I'll just if you have missed in the break time, we're gonna do the labs later, not in this session, because the lab has some technical difficulties. Imran will show us the lab, run it through his local, and then after this session, when the portal is back up, he will send you all an email saying you can now run the lab and you will be able to follow it there.
Yeah, and are you able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so this is our website, and then you are at the courses URL, right? So yeah, so let's go here. What happened? Okay, let me share it again. Okay, I hope you're able to see my screen now. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so first thing, as I mentioned, we were going to do Nikto. So let's get started. Start the machine exercise. So this exercise will take you through on what are the different options Nikto provides us, how to install it, and how you can embed them eventually into a CI/CD pipeline so that it gets scanned on every commit, every push, every merge request, pull request. So you have some sense of security of an app. Okay, so let me start the exercise. And meanwhile, let me read the content here, right? So the content here says, in this scenario, you're going to install a DAST tool, which is Nikto for us case, and then we're going to run that tool. And it gives us a brief idea of what the tool is. Again, I have already covered that here for you, but it's added here for the sake of completeness. So it can support SSL, proxies, host authentication, and it provides a lot of good, interesting functionality. It's not up to date though, but again, don't worry about it. It does provide a value even though it's not up to date. So I'm just gonna click on this link, and you will see that as soon as I do that, it installed a Nikto tool, right? So this is a similar output which you will see. Once you have that, we have to create a file called nikto.dtd. This is one of the prerequisites for the tool to work. And then finally, we are gonna look at Nikto help to see what are the different options it provides us. Okay, so you can just run Nikto help and you see there's a bunch of options. So --help without capital H provides you a smaller version of the help. Bigger version of that is -help. Then we can explore this. So a couple of interesting things which comes out pretty predominantly here is the format. We want to save in probably CSV file. HTML is for humans, for machines we use CSV, XML, and whatnot, right? You can decide which tests to run on, which codes to ignore, which plugins to enable, because you know for sure you don't use WordPress, so you might want to get rid of those tests. You might want to say, okay, this is the maximum time I want to spend per system. So that's how it's going to be. The port which I'm going to use it on, and how we want to save, which directory we want to save, and then do you want to scan the SSL as well. But for the sake of this tutorial or this exercise, we are not going to use SSL because we have another dedicated tool called SSLize to help us scan this. Okay, we're not going to use that. So let's move on. Look at what else is asking us to do. Okay, let's go next. Now, what we will do is we'll run this tool on a server, right? Demo.testfire.net is a server created for the sake of testing tools, right? So again, don't ever attack a machine without permission from the owners. It's illegal in some countries, specifically more so in Europe. And if you get caught, then you are in for a rough time. Okay, so again, as we have been doing.
Imran.
Sure.
Yeah. When you mentioned the SSL,
yeah,
can you explain a bit? Well, what is the difference between testing the SSL and not testing the SSL? What does that mean?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about this here.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so today we're just going to see if this application, which is hosted on some domain name or an IP address, does it have some vulnerabilities, a kind of baseline vulnerabilities, which you can quickly find and try to fix them. Like this is the bare minimum baseline things you have to have. So as you can see, we quickly find out that there is no X-frame options present in this app, whatever this app is. So we might want to add that because it's a security best practice to avoid clickjacking. Then it does allow you to do send, delete options and put verbs, which can have a bad impact if you're using API, if you don't want to allow it to happen. Or if you're using a web server and you don't have put delete options, unless you're using WebDAV, then you might want to delete it. Right? This is something like very bare minimum, like, oh, you don't want to expose your server version. You don't want to expose that versus that, etc. And yeah, so as you see, put delete, pretty good. And it also says that, okay, it identifies that we are using some version of Java because JSession ID is typically of Java applications. So that's that. So it's going to find out a few more issues. Let us wait. Okay, let it wait. Meanwhile, we will cover what are the different options it provides. Okay, as you can see, if you're behind a proxy, you can use authentication and proxy information to do that. You can check the database if it's up to date. You can also employ evasion techniques, meaning if you have a firewall, then having minus evasion helps you randomly create UI encoding, self-reference, and all of that. And I've used this. It doesn't work so nicely in the current scenario. You have better tools to do that. You can chain other tools to do this. Okay. Then you can also save them in this format, different bunch of formats. We are picking for XML because it's very easy to work with, right? We have also defined -h short for host as well. Basically, we're saying scan this host, right? It's taking some time. Let it take, and then we don't want to interact with it because you're putting it into a CI/CD pipeline. Then maybe you want to put no interactive here. That will help. If you're scanning an IP address, you don't want to look at DNS to speed up the scan, then you can click this thing. You don't want to scan SSL, you can say no SSL. We can also say don't look into 404 errors and whatnot. Okay, and you can enable, disable plugins. You can give it a certificate. It's a self-signed certificates or something of that sort, where you, client certificate file, something like that. And these are some of the attacks it might scan, look for, right? So you have here misconfigurations, command injection, SQL injection. There are better tools to do that, but then this just gives you a rough idea of what's going on, how this thing looks like. And if you want to update it, it would figure it out as well. Okay, so as simple as that, run this. And when you want to put this into CI/CD pipeline, you will just copy this and put it there. You can also put them into Docker containers so that you don't have to install Perl on that machine. And that will definitely make something platform independent. So yeah, something to look into. Okay, moving on. I'll let it finish, but we'll move on to SSLIs. Okay, so we figured it out that Nikto gives us pretty good overview, the baseline of are we missing any security headers, or do we have any kind of vulnerable directory listings and whatnot, right? So it helps you figure that out, fix it up. Then the next thing we want to do is once we deploy something to production, you first deploy it to staging environment. And we try to keep the staging environment as close as possible to your production environment by using something like SSLIs, right? Meaning embedding SSL. So SSLIs is a very powerful tool to help you gauge how good your website is from an SSL perspective. Is it standing at A, B, and C, something like that. So it will help you figure that out for you. Okay, it looks at the best practices and then figures it out. And it supports TLS 1.3 function. And if there is some issue, you can definitely fail the build saying that you are not following best practices on a server. So please do that thing setup. And it can find out if your server is vulnerable to robot vulnerability. It can not only scan HTTPS, but the secure version of SMTP, LDAPS, POPS, IMAP, RDP, SFTP, and some more. All right. So let's look at an example of this exercise for us. So it's taking forever, and all I have to do if a system is stuck or just I ran out of patience, just have to restart and it will come back again. Okay, so you can read this up here again, and then I'm just gonna reinstall it. Go back to the. It's as simple as that. You can run it as many times as possible. Run it, as you can see. Hopefully this will run faster now, a bit faster now. Okay, looks like it's running fine. Okay, yeah. I'm not sure if we will go beyond this. Let's see. Let's hope for the best. So in another tab, I'm just gonna. Okay, so it's running. Let it run. In another tab, you're going to do SSLI's exercise, and as we see before, it's going to be it's going to take 10 minutes for us to do that. And this is part of DAST, and this attacks your web application. For compliance as code, we have inspect, and the tag defines the exercise as well. So as you can see, it can find out SSL and TLS misconfigurations on staging and production environment. This is more so suited for staging environment. So let's do that. Click on this link. It will start a server for me, and then it will put me into a terminal. What I will do next is, let's first install the SSLI's tool, right? We already discussed what this is. So let's install this. As I mentioned, you just have to click a button. It installs everything for you. You don't even have to type something, right? So it's gonna install this. I'm gonna slightly pause my screen share just to ensure that
It looks more like frozen rather than because I can still see your screen.
yeah.
Oh, okay, it's come back live again.
Okay, so we're gonna install. Hopefully this time it works. Okay, yeah. Fair enough. So it got installed. This is the typical output we are expecting here. As you can see, the SSLI is something, something. We also included here. We can look at the help of SSLIs by executing this command. Again, I just clicked on that. Anything which has a checkbox, say like the tick, then it means we executed this command, and you can see it adds a bunch of value. So the one thing which we are interested to see is where we are going to attack this, what is going to be its port number, and what are the different options we want to use. So we want to make sure that we are scanning for best practices for TLS 1.2, TLS 1.1, TLS 1. These are not recommended anymore, but we are just going to scan it just for the sake of it, right? Even SSL V2, this we are doing for the sake of completeness, because we might have still some infrastructure which is on TLS 1 or 1.1 for whatever reason. Ideally, right, that's what we want to do, but sometimes it's not possible to be on 1.2. That's the reality of the situation. But yeah, so these are some of the options. So what we're going to use now is that we will just do a regular scan. We want to give an IP address of ours, and then look at how securely that is created, how securely it is configured. And if it is not, we will try to fail the build and then make sure your developers or operations fixes it. And if you're interested, you can definitely look at, you want to test for heartbleed, OpenSSL, CSS injection, CS injection, session renegotiation and whatnot. So can you definitely look into that. Even robot, vulnerable to robot. And if you want to scan your TL, SMTP, LDAP, and something of those servers, as you can see here, you might want to use these options. So we're just going to keep it simple, plain, and run it against an HTTPS server. Okay. And eventually we're going to save it in a JSON file because we want to put it into some remote machine. So I'll scroll down and then go to the next exercise. As you can see, I'm just going to clear my screen. And this is the IP owned by us, so you're not attacking anyone else. This is our IP, so we're just going to run a scan against it, see how that turns up. Right? Okay, so we are running a scan on this one. As you can see, it enabled these plugins. We are going to check for Heartbleed. We're going to check for Robot, OpenSSL, Zipper Suits plugin, HTTP headers, and whatnot. Okay, there you go. So it does give us saying that, oh, this service is not available at the moment, right? So maybe then we can go look at so what was that? Prod, yeah, this is the IP address. Okay, not available. Okay, this server is still available. So let's go use it and then see Nikto. We're gonna use -h. Oh, sorry, this is wrong window. Okay, but eventually the Nikto finished. So I'm gonna close this exercise. We're gonna go here and I'm gonna say SSLize -- regular and then say IP address. Let's try this. Okay. Okay, so we're going to say 443. Sorry. Okay. So SSLize regular. Then we're just going to say okay, so SSLize regular. Let's do the scan of a localhost. It's not on 443, right? Just give me a minute, guys. I'm just gonna create this and then copy it in a text editor, then do 443. Okay, there you go. So it's running. So we are doing SSL testing on this server. This is the IP address. This is the, okay, fair enough. It did not find the GitLab machine, but then we are good here. Okay, so you can see here that it supports forward secrecy, which is pretty good. Then what else we have? Okay, so it does say it is not vulnerable to your CCS injection attack. It's not vulnerable to Heartbleed. It supports version TLS 101. It supported RC4, which is bad, is not supported with us. Yeah, right. So it's yeah, it's giving me pretty good information. As you can see, the certificate does match, owned by Google, whatnot. And this is a domain name as such we have, right? So you can see that it's definitely adding value by finding SSL misconfiguration issues there, okay? So that's our SSLize, trying to see if we are securing our SSL infrastructure properly. Okay, now do we have any questions before we move on?
I was going to ask that as well. Any questions? Nope.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which is Nmap. Okay, who doesn't know Nmap here? Or like, who knows Nmap here? What Nmap does? What
I
problem
remember we
does
do
Nmap?
have a few pen testers, so.
Yeah. What it does, you can Google it if you want. But the point is, it tells you if there are any ports open which are not supposed to be open to the outside world, right? So that's what we are trying to look at from an outside infrastructure and whatnot. And for the staging environment itself, maybe it adds value to scan this thing on your staging environment or production environment. And this pipeline is not part of your production DevSecOps pipeline. Maybe it makes sense to do it on regular basis somewhere in a QA test or somewhere in the smoke test, right? So I have a question here. The DevSecOps pipeline in test shouldn't be similar to production, right? What do you mean by that? Then can you give me an example of what should be enabled in production DevSecOps pipeline and what should be disabled? Okay, so since we are moving into the realm of shifting left, we will try to do as much as test possible in staging environment or development environment or testing environment. We will try to avoid doing tests in the production environment, but there is definitely some value testing the production environment. Maybe you can use chaos engineering, you can do run some tests, but please be mindful that when you run tests on production machine, it can have some side effects. Maybe you're adding new rows to your database, maybe you're taking your server down. So you have to be really careful. That's why, typical pen test engagement, they say, what is out of scope? They say usually you're not supposed to do DOS attacks or DDoS attacks, and then please don't do brute force. And some people say don't run anything on a production machine because it might crash. And even I know that even simple Nmap scans can crash a server. It's as simple as that. Yeah, it sounds silly, but that's how it is. I hope that answers your question. If anyone else has any question, I'm happy to answer your question. So what tests you want to run in test stage? A lot of them. You can run all of these as part of test, provided you have some way to reach the application. Okay, so yeah, there's a compliance requirement of doing pen test, right? Which might involve sometimes running tools, automated tools. Sometimes they are not. Sometimes you prefer to do manual pen testing. But yeah, I would prefer you do test even on production, but be careful while you're doing it. Okay, just a word of caution. And no one is stopping you from doing all of these tests on production. Technically, it's possible. You should be doing it if you can, but be mindful that it might have side effects. That's it. That's the only problem we might have there. Okay, so let's see an example of the lab of our Nmap. Okay, so okay, the production machine is back up again, which is good. Let's go back to the courses. We are done with SSLIs. We are not gonna see this. This is done. SCA we're gonna do tomorrow or day after tomorrow, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, there you go. So this is Nmap. We're just gonna run Nmap. Okay. Let's start the exercise, and meanwhile, let's read what's going on here. So first, we are going to install the tool, and which is Nmap. If you want to know, looks like most of you know, it's a port scanner which helps you find out if we have exposed something outside exposed on the internet, which we are not supposed to, right? So let's first install this app, Nmap app, or the package. As you can see, we installed it. How do I know that? Let us try running, clear the screen, Nmap see if it, yeah, see, it gave me some prompt. Okay. Now we are just going to use a vanilla version of Nmap. Okay. So yeah. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do, hold on a minute, Nmap, and probably, yeah, probably just test this guy here. Let me see if it's up. Okay, because these machines are spawned up and down, taken down based on the, okay. Let's see if this works. I don't think this works. Hold on. I want to just use.
There's a question.
Sure. Hold on. Just
check. Oh.
Just give a minute. Let me run this.
No
we'll have time to talk about. Okay. So let's run this. Okay. There you go. It does say, okay, you have 4600, 990, 8500, 8300, 80443. And let me tell you, some of these are false positives here. Okay, we are not running exposing services on some of those ports. Okay, so yeah, as you can see, now we can even save this thing in okay, what's that? So yeah, this is the command. We're gonna copy this command, paste it here, and here we are gonna look at how can I save it in a file, which is this one here. Yeah, 0x. What did I just do? Okay, I ran this entire thing. Okay, I did something funny there. But what we're going to do is we're going to say, can you please save the results in XML file, and we will call this file nmap output.xml. Right? As you can see, I'm not clicking on these images, but rather making this command out. Okay, yeah. So which means now if I do this, I should be able to see an XML page, XML output. Yes, you can see there's it scanned these many, and we are able to see that there is this port open called SSH port, HTTP, HTTPS, asterisk, Zeus admin, and definitely we are not running malware on it. Okay, so yeah, so clear that. So yeah, as you can see, it definitely helps us. You can also scan other URLs if you want to. Just scan that. There you go. It should come up. This is again internal. This is an internet machine accessible by internet. This is our machine which we just scanned. This is internet. This is someone else's machine. Again, this is, you're allowed to test this. This is a demo site. But don't, please, I have to warn you again, don't try to scan someone else who you don't have permission to scan. Okay, as you can see, it has 8080, could be a Tomcat installation, could be a Zap installation, and then whatnot. Okay, so this is something we can do from a again, OSX is a flag used to tell the tool that output should be saved in XML format. This is what the output might look like for a server IP. And yeah, so there you have it. So we have done so far a few things. We have used SSLize to scan. We have used Nmap to scan. We have used Nikto to scan services. All right. So these are some of the things which we have done. If you fancy, you can install WP scan, that scan, and this scan. A lot of those scans are definitely possible to scan against. Okay. Now, some of you say, okay, Imran, you know what? These tests will only run on your lab environment, and they don't work on, our production environment. So yeah, so it works in your lab. It does not work in our lab, is what you might say to me. Okay, so what we will do to get rid of that notion is, let's Google now. So Zap, which is another tool, we will go into more details, but I want to cover quickly the baseline scan. of what we're doing here. Okay, I'm just going to go to the website here, and I'm just going to quickly pick out, like, this is a target and this is a baseline scan. So we are going to scan our own machine, the lab machines, this machine specifically, right? So I'm just going to click on here, come here, pick up this entire URL, all right, and then put it here, and then hit enter. Sorry, I'm supposed to run it locally, right? Silly me. So there's a Docker container which you can use to do this, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this entire command. I'll paste it here. And then instead of that IP URL, I'm going to use my website. As you can see, I'm in a map scan machine, and I can run that. But I want to run it locally as well. So as you can see, I'm scanning this machine from my local Mac, my host, to the web app. Okay, there you go. It's running the scan.
We received like 4 questions in the chat window. Just letting you know.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Is SSLI a good fit? Yeah, it definitely finishes within 10 minutes. So yeah, it does help if you put it in CI/CD pipeline so that you can make sure that it runs on a regular cadence. If you want to do like a smoke test as part of staging environment, helps there as well. Again, all of these tests can be categorized. Say that you can say, can you please run it on every commit? Can you please run this only when we are deploying to production or staging? So yeah, you can configure that. So whoever asked that question, good question. It makes sense to run it, on a regular cadence, maybe on every major release. So do we run DAST scans for mobile apps? Yeah, why not? As long as you can emulate that. Okay, now there are a couple of things when it comes to mobile apps. One thing is most of these mobile apps are dependent on some form of API, right? So if you test APIs, then definitely you are testing your web app function, mobile app functionality. But there are few things which are only related to Android or only related to iPhone. So you have to have a device where you can test it. So you have some online services which will allow you to spin up the emulators, do the test, and shut it down. If you can do that, yes. As I mentioned before, you are running test against some running code. Right? That's the example of DAST. So yes, you can use mobile apps. You can do mobile apps DAST as well. So I don't want to brag here, but we do teach that in our courses. So yeah, doable. We have done it. Can be done. Do you know any tool we can collect and see all pipeline results in a dashboard, for example? That's what I was talking about when I say Defect Dojo. So check that out. It's an OWASP project created by some amazing people. Paid tools, there are few, but I don't want to talk about them on camera at the moment. Yeah, so we want to promote open source OWASP specifically. Sure, go look at Defect Dojo. It's an amazing tool for what the value they provide. Yeah, so I have another question. In test environment, while I'm implementing DAST, how can I configure when the build should fail? Can you give an example? Okay, so unless and otherwise you have a strong reason of failing a build, don't fail a build. As simple as that. Okay, because these tools are riddled with false positives. No matter which tool you use, paid, free, and whatnot, they have false positives. And if you are failing builds based on false positives, it's a sure recipe for disaster. And people, people thinking that you are naive or don't know what you're doing, so they might not be interested to put these things in CI/CD.
You won't be very popular.
Yeah, you won't be popular. Yeah. So again, as I mentioned, people, processes, and technology. Okay. Okay. Do we run desktop application DAST testing? I just showed you that. Okay. So from my desktop, I attacked, where am I? Okay, so I attacked a production machine. What's stopping me from attacking a local machine? I can do a local host something, and it will happily scan that for me, right? So you can do that, right? I'm just running tests. If you can execute a command, you can put it in a CI/CD pipeline, right? No matter what fancy tool someone is trying to do it. Okay, now can we do thick client testing on this one? Yes. Again, they are talking from a thick client perspective, even that can be done, right? So, but maybe Zap is not a good tool for that. If you have it, so Zap is meant for any HTTP protocol based apps, right? HTTP over SSL. But yeah, it depends. If a tool helps you solve that, then definitely allows you to do that. Yeah, so what about Zap HUD? Do that?
So I think that has a desktop application, doesn't it? Am I? Oh, it's web only. Okay.
Okay, so there's this line between what is a desktop app versus what is not is kind of blurring now because of Docker, virtualization, and whatnot. So yeah. So desktop app, yes, you can do it. You can do multiple things. One, you can start with static analysis, figure out the issues there, and figure out what type of communication mechanism it uses to talk to a service, and then you can attack that service as well. I hope that answers your question. Now let's look into the Zap, which is an amazing tool on how to do dynamic analysis tool. Again, when I say some people are offended when I say Zap is amazing tool, but then I say, okay, this is a free tool, buddy. What do you expect, right? So Zap provides a lot of value for what it does. Okay, so it's open source, it's cross-platform, it's Java, so it's cross-platform. It's easy to install. They have a Docker container. You can just spin it just like you have seen. I just ran one command. It did it for me. It's easy to use and it's actively maintained. Again, another OWASP project from amazing OWASP folks. Simon and other people are really contributing to this platform. Definitely follow them on Twitter and other places, right? Yeah, so Zap has, to be very honest, it's one scan, but then you can say baseline scan and Zap scan. The reason why we say baseline scan is because if you notice, this finished probably in a couple of seconds, not minutes. But whereas if you run a dynamic analysis scans, it takes like forever to finish a scan, okay? So as you can see, it does say you don't have content security policy here, so you might want to add it. And it also says you don't have X type options. And then you have cross-domain policies. You're not caching something. You don't have a secure flag on this one. Again, if you look at this is not a web app, production web app, so we don't care about all of these in our situation. But for a production app, this is very much needed. And you can see we definitely do follow some best practices here. As you can see, we are using X-frame options. This is a bare minimum security we have to put, and this is an ideal candidate to put it into a CI/CD pipeline. Okay, so definitely do put this in CI/CD pipeline. And so it does say there are some suspicious comments. Yeah, there are no suspicious comments, sorry. And cookie poisoning is not possible. Directory browsing is not possible. And then it says that it's inductive, okay? It's not pretty sure about it. So Heartbleed is not possible, probably, okay? And then we definitely use strict transport security. This header is not exposed by us. And then we do transition from HTTP. If someone comes to HTTP, we transfer it to HTTPS. So these are best practices, but definitely it did fail some of these tests. For us, it does not matter because it's not a production app, but if you are using a production app, we definitely want to ensure that it has a secure flag HTTP only. And this is a baseline scan because this is a bare minimum we might want to enforce across our organization. Some of these is not relevant. Some of these is relevant to your app. So you create baselines on an app basis, on an organization basis, and then go from there. So yeah, pretty subject. Yeah, pretty like that. Now, and then you also have full scan, right? And most people, when they are pissed off with dynamic analysis, they are pissed off with this, the full scan, not Zap, but any tool, because it takes ages and ages to finish. But if you can disable a few plugins and only run the necessary ones which are related to your app and parallelize them, then you can definitely achieve these things within 15 to 10 minutes, right? So you also have baseline scans here. As you can see, it's ideal for CI/CD setup, and this is ideal for QA scans. This is a question someone asked me before. It finds low-hanging fruit, so don't think that it's going to catch everything. It does go into deeper scans. It can check specific scans. It's very easy to get started, needs a lot of tuning. This is something which you have to be very cognizant of. You have to be aware that DAST in itself is pretty expensive endeavor, even though you're using a free tool. You have to tweak it based on the authentication mechanism, access control mechanisms, also based on a per app basis as well. If you're using microservices, then again, your work will increase substantially because you might have to create this on a per app basis. Might not be the case always, but could be the case for you. Okay, so as we've seen, we will embed baseline scan as part of CI/CD pipelines, but active scans will be run as part of QA scans, which is where we will also embed the full-blown static analysis scan. So we did see this. I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but if you want to do active scan, authenticated scans, this is how the pipeline might look like. I will end my presentation here because we are going into an advanced concept of how you can use Selenium to drive our browser, and then that gets driven. That's then again injected into Zap, and then finally we scan the application with it. Right? It's pretty. You can do it. We can do this with Burp Suite. We can do it with Zap. You can do it with a lot of other proxies you have in the market available. So I did show you a demo on local machine just to be mindful of things. You also have Arachne, which they just stopped developing. You have other commercial tools, which I don't want to talk about on screen. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'm happy to take any questions. Yeah.
There's one about false positives. We have briefly covered it. However, if you want to take a look at the question in the chat window.
Sure. So while the question is, while implementing DAST in DevSecOps, what's the strategy to eliminate false positives? Because human intervention is needed to get false positives. To be very honest, if you configure the baseline scan, you don't have a lot of room to say it can go wrong. Okay, there's definitely initially when you first run, there's the chances of you having false positives, but then once you tweak it once, and then you can just you will not have false positives. But yeah, false positive is one of the biggest challenges, pain points on how to do false positive. That's where I talked about how do we do false positives as code so that those issues are not shown again. So you have to write custom rule sets for that. Teach the tool how to do it. Even the paid tools need to be taught on how to do it. That's why you have plugins for these tools, right? Be it Zap, Burp, they have specialized plugins to achieve something. Eventually that gets added into your master branch, meaning that they add it as part of the tooling itself, but it can take a while for something like that to happen. So yeah, as I mentioned, baseline scan is the right fit for DevSecOps, and full-blown scans probably even in the QA scans. So even those long scans can be automated, parallelized, and then false positives can also be reduced on a regular cadence. Maybe it will take some time, but eventually you'll get there. Okay, so yeah, Sam has a good tip here if you might want to look into the question. What about desktop apps, the native apps, if you have? So static analysis definitely is a value add there. You can also analyze EXEs, DLLs. If you want to, there is a DL injection. You can check for DLL injection. You can check for DLL loading. That some of those things like a fuzzer. Yeah. So for desktop apps, fuzzing is your dynamic analysis, right? Basically, you give it a malicious input and see how it behaves. And you have AFL there, which is amazing open source tool. You have a lot of, so I have this project called Awesome Fuzzing Project. If you are interested in looking at, looking at fuzzing, so you just search for Awesome Fuzzing. The first result is our project, Awesome Fuzzing. So yeah, that's something you can do from a dynamic analysis perspective.
Great.
Yeah, thank you, Sam, for answering those questions. Pretty helpful.
I think we can slowly wrap up or quickly wrap up. It's been a really good session. Even though we didn't do the labs ourselves, it was really still very practical because we saw how to use diversity of tools in the pipeline for the same thing. So you don't just use one. It's quite how it happens in real life, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So we have to start somewhere, right? So starting with open source tools will allow you to show the value to your organization, and then probably then you can move on to well-supported paid or commercial tooling for that matter, right? So yeah, it's a good start, as you can see. And thanks a lot, everyone, for taking time and then going through this DAST exercise with us. And then, yeah, appreciate all of you. Once again, thank you for being such a nice folks here. Yep,
thank you.
Thank you, Diva. Thank you.
I'll stop the recording, but don't go anywhere.
Sure.